Hare Krishna and Pranam dear devotees. So welcome to our Prabhupada as a founder Acharya seminar series, online series. And today we have the sixth lesson, Varnashram Challenge by His Grace Sureshwar Prabhu. So all of us, we heartily welcome His Grace Sureshwar Prabhu by loudly chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. His Grace Sureshwar Prabhu ki jai, Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Over to you, Sureshwar Prabhu.
Right. Well, I'm so happy to be back after some 6 weeks. Too much time, huh? The world is too busy, but here we are again. And I think you see well, let's see, Giriraj Prabhu. I guess Giriraj Prabhu is still moving the slides. So I think you see the title slide of Srila Prabhupada at Bhaktivedanta Manor. So here we are. So welcome back to the Founder Acharya Essential Series. So lesson 6, yes, is called his Varnashram Challenge. Between 1965 and 1977, Srila Prabhupada wrote dozens of books, opened over 100 centers, and initiated thousands of disciples worldwide. By 1977, his non-stop sacrifice had taken its toll on his body. Returning to Vrindavan to continue translating Sanskrit texts about Krishna into English, Prabhupada observed that his days on earth were numbered. When a disciple later asked if His Divine Grace had any regrets, Prabhupada acknowledged he had, quote, one lamentation: that you have not finished translating the Srimad Bhagavatam. That was actually Brahmananda Swami at the time who said that. No, that I have not established Varnashram. And although you won't find that quote in the database, that quote came from a 1996 interview with Abhiram Prabhu that my colleague Hari Krishna Dasi conducted with him in 1996 in Vrindavan. Abhiram was Prabhupada's nurse in Prabhupada's last year, so he was privy to a lot of things that Prabhupada said. And some of the things Prabhupada said only Abhiram heard, because sometimes Abhiram was the only person in the room. Okay. So Prabhupada said, his one lamentation was that I have not established Varnashram, that timeless culture that shepherds us from the material to the spiritual realm. Varnashram appears repeatedly in Prabhupada's teachings. Yet His Divine Grace had been so busy spreading the Hare Krishna movement, he scarcely had time to demonstrate Varnashram's practical application in the modern age. Indeed, only in the last years of his life did he identify Varnashram's social and spiritual benefits as the key to attracting humanity en masse to Krishna. Next slide. Quote. This is a quote from Prabhupada's last year. This is the next aspect of Krishna consciousness which I wish to push forward. Srila Prabhupada wrote, one disciple, quote, on these farms we can demonstrate the full Varnashram system. If these farms can become successful, then the whole world will be enveloped by Krishna consciousness. In the cities, we are interested for preaching, but we cannot present the ideal Varnashram system. This is possible only at the farms, so they are very important. That was excerpts of a letter that Prabhupada wrote to Harishari Prabhu as Tamal Krishna Maharaj recorded excerpts from the letter in his diary. And the diary date was 10th August 1977. Now, despite the importance Prabhupada gave to Varnashram, his followers have been slow to embrace this consummate aspect of his mission. To understand why and what to do now, we first need to recognize the different ways Prabhupada used the term Varnashram. So now what follows is the 4 ways Prabhupada used that phrase, Varnashram. Next slide. The first way Prabhupada used the phrase was what I call Vedic Varnashram. According to India's Vedic literature, Krishna consciousness once flourished all over the world, with a culture at once scientific and spiritual, down to earth and out of this world. Developing their natural vocations or varnas and transcending them in stages or ashrams, people found harmony and fulfillment working together to please Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In the Bhagavad Gita 4:13, Lord Krishna teaches, famous verse, quote, according to the 3 modes of material nature and the work associated with them, the 4 divisions of human society are created by me. That's the Varna verse introduction by Krishna in the Gita. As unquote, as the parts of the body work together to serve the whole, in Varnashram, 4 broad vocational groups cooperate to serve the social body. In Vedic times, the guarantors of that cooperation were samskars, sacred rites of passage through stages of spiritual progress. Prior to conceiving a child, for example, cultured people meditated on the divine, while aware that life comes from life, and that the quality of their progeny would reflect the quality of their consciousness, especially at the time of conception. Quote, that is Vedic civilization, Prabhupada observed. Samskar before the birth and immediately after the birth, then one after another. Marriage is also another samskar. These are Dasha Vida Samskar, 10 purificatory rites. But where is samskara going on today? Nobody takes care of samskar. Still, they are declaring that I am Brahmin, or highborn. Therefore, the conclusion is, Kalo Shudra Sambhavaha. Everyone is lowborn. That was, Prabhupada said that on a morning walk in Bombay in the 10th of April, 1974. Now, indeed, the modern chaos reflects the general quality of the world's population, as if born of a bottle of beer on Saturday night. The sacred act that once called souls to enter the world to revive their love of God is today routinely reduced to a contact sport, hostile to its natural outcome, conception. Indeed, those who make it into a womb today often don't make it out alive. As much as Prabhupada liked to present Krishna consciousness as the positive alternative to modern civilization, he knew the days of classic Vedic Varnashram, which he called the days of yore, were gone. To spread Krishna consciousness everywhere in modern times would require a special adaptation of Varnashram culture, according to, quote, time, candidate, and country. Prabhupada used to say that phrase in many places in his books. So that's Vedic Varnashram. Prabhupada reminiscing about how it used to be in the good old days of when Vedic culture was worldwide. Now, the next way Prabhupada used the phrase I call dormant or sleeping or potential Varnashram. Next slide. Though classic Varnashram may be gone, its dormant realities endure, awaiting activation. For example, despite utopian attempts to make humanity classless, by nature, classes remain. Speaking with a Russian professor in Moscow during the Soviet era, Prabhupada compared Varnashram to the sun. This is a famous conversation, which coincidentally, I'm hearing it right now, this morning. I always hear a recording of Prabhupada while I go through my morning ablutions, getting ready for Mangal Arti. It's the beginning of the day here. It's, what do you know? It was the June 22nd, 1971 conversation that Prabhupada had with his Russian professor, Grigory Kotovsky. So here's a quote from that conversation. And Prabhupada's comparing Varnashram to the sun. Quote, so sunshine is here in America, in Russia, in India, everywhere. Similarly, this Varnashram system is prevalent everywhere in some form or other. Just like the Brahmanas. The Brahmanas means the most intelligent class of men, brain of the society. Then the Kshatriyas, the administrator class. Then the Vaishyas, the productive class. And the Shudras, the worker class. These four classes are everywhere present in different names. And because it is creation by the original creator, it is prevalent everywhere. Varnashram. Unquote. The professor speaking with Srila Prabhupada was an intellectual. Others in his school were administrators, still others, workers, and so on. By divine design, different classes of people exist, not to exploit, but to cooperate with one another. Oblivious of that design, materialistic classes clash and suffer. The equality we seek fully blossoms in devotional service, where all classes are valued as servants of the Supreme. When these values are forgotten, the Lord's natural Varnashram order becomes corrupted, as India's history shows. So Prabhupada, he was very poignantly giving Kotovsky his example, because Kotovsky was a committed, dyed-in-the-wool Marxist, Leninist. And Marxist-Leninism is always trying to make everybody, make society classless. But it's absurd, because even as Prabhupada speaking to this man in the very building they were, you had different classes of people. So communism is simply a reaction to the exploitation of one class by another, but it's not the solution. The only way to make everybody really equal is spiritually, because materially we're all very different. But we don't have to clash, we can cooperate in devotional service. So we'll get to that later. So the third way Prabhupada used Varnashram was he used it to describe a materialistic Varnashram. And here's some quotes. Quote, the vitiated or corrupted, the vitiated caste system of present India is never sanctioned by the scriptures, Prabhupada wrote Indian Deputy Prime Minister Dr. Sardar Patel. But the caste system is made by God according to quality and work of the subject, and it was never designed for the benefit of accidental birthright. Next slide, excuse me. That was, yeah, Prabhupada was writing to the number 2 man in India. Patel was the deputy prime minister right under Nehru. So, corrupt Brahmins claiming power and privilege based on birth have obscured the truth and beauty of India's original Varnashram culture. Just doing a little editing here. Though typecast by the nature we acquire at birth, By engaging in devotional service, we can rise above nature's modes to realize our spiritual potential by cooperatively serving the Lord. Lacking loving service, too often we compete and bargain with one another. We treat God like Santa Claus, a great order supplier, and we run a ritualistic race to heaven, whether the Western idea of heaven or the Eastern idea of Svarga. East or West, such materialistic religion wearies us as it wearies God. It's love we're all after. Intimate exchanges of selfless service, which is the real spirit of divine Varnashram culture. So far we've had Vedic Varnashram, then we have dormant Varnashram, and then we had materialistic Varnashram. Now here's the kind of Varnashram that Prabhupada had in mind for the modern world, beginning with ISKCON. 4. Varnashram for modern times. Varnashram that elevates us from material to spiritual consciousness is called Daiva, or divine. Prabhupada's Daiva Varnashram for modern times includes 4 essential features. 1. Pure devotional service to Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as the goal of life. 2. Local land and cow economics as the model for sustainable living. 3. Varnashram colleges for vocational and spiritual retraining. And 4. The introduction of Daiva Varnashram principles according to, again, quote, time, candidate, and country. Borrowing a phrase from the British poet Wordsworth, whom Prabhupada studied at Scottish Churches College. Prabhupada knew these British poets because his Scottish fathers, that was part of the curriculum. Borrowing a phrase from the British poet Wordsworth, Prabhupada sometimes described Daiva Varnashram as, quote, plain living and high thinking. When Krishna descended to earth, he himself lived this way in the rural village of Vrindavan as a boy, and later in clean and green Dwarka city as a youthful prince. It wasn't like a dirty modern dungeon of demons, as Prabhupada calls these modern cities. I call it clean and green, Dwarka, plenty of parks, plenty of healthy spaces, as a youthful prince. If we could show the world a better way to live, Prabhupada reasoned, everyone would eventually take the Daiva Varnashram journey home. Prabhupada's vision was the fruit of a lifetime of preaching, but since most modern Hare Krishna people don't live the way Krishna lives, we've been slow to understand how Prabhupada's application of Varnashram to ISKCON evolved over time. So now we're going to look at how Prabhupada applied Varnashram to ISKCON over 3 phases of time. 3 applications. 1, forget Varnashram. That was more or less what Prabhupada was saying to us for the majority of his preaching years. From 1966 to 1973, the majority of his global preaching years, Srila Prabhupada often dismissed Varnashram as impractical. Quote, therefore, this is the panacea to engage everyone in Krishna consciousness, chanting Hare Krishna. This is the only remedy. Now you cannot again introduce this system of Varnashram. That was end of 1968 in LA. While he was launching ISKCON, Prabhupada's priority was to put a head back on society. Quote, at the present moment, the society is headless, a dead body, or head cracked, crazy. There is head, nonsense head. What is the use of nonsense head? Therefore, there is a great necessity of creating a class who will act as brain and head. That is Krishna consciousness movement, unquote. That was the very month I joined, 1970, July. Only it was in San Francisco. I joined in Boston, the other side of the US. Since the Brahmins are the head of the Varnashram social body, as much as possible, Prabhupada was engaging his disciples in Brahminical activities, chanting Hare Krishna, worshiping in the temple, studying and distributing his books, staging spiritual festivals, and so on. For the most part, this strategy worked, but not always, as this exchange with an early follower illustrates. So this is in the very early days, back in 26 2nd Avenue, 1966. There was one kind of rough character who was in the storefront. His name was Raphael, so Hispanic American. So here's a quote from the Lilamrita. One day after a lecture, Raphael approached the Swami, stood beside the dais, and spoke up, exasperated, impatient. I am not meant to sit in a temple and chant on beads. My father was a boxer. I am meant to run on the beach and breathe in big breaths of air. Raphael went on, gesticulating, that means gesturing vigorously, and voicing his familiar complaints, things he would rather do than take up Krishna consciousness. Suddenly, Prabhupada interrupted him in a loud voice. Then do it! Do it! Raphael shrank away, but he stayed. Unquote. And most did stay in those heady days of spiritual revolution, pleased with the counterculture youth flocking to his clarion call to chant Hare Krishna. Prabhupada still wanted to give Krishna consciousness to everyone, including people who would not chant. Soon Krishna would set the world stage to help Prabhupada make Varnashram culture more accessible and urgent, starting with his own followers. So that's the first phase, 66 to 73. Phase 2, the world needs Varnashram. In 1973, owing to artificial manipulation of the oil supply in the Middle East, the modern world experienced a, quote, energy crisis. High fuel prices, long fuel lines, and violence dramatized the folly of a civilization that runs on harmful fossil fuels. Amidst the angst, Srila Prabhupada saw an opportunity. Walking and talking with leading disciples the following spring, so now we're into March 74. Prabhupada noted that if we could show the public a better way to live, they would be more inclined to listen to Krishna. Quote, because if the people are in chaos, how they'll be able to accept the great philosophy? It requires cool brain, unquote. So that was 14th of March. 74 in Vrindavan. Indeed, a brain nourished by fresh milk from protected cows, Prabhupada wrote, quote, can assimilate the subtle form of spiritual knowledge. That's from Light of the Bhagavad, text 27. To show the world a better way to live, Prabhupada's followers would have to learn and teach the fundamentals of Varnashram culture. Quote, a Varnashram college has to be established immediately, Prabhupada declared. Everywhere, wherever we have got our center, a Varnashram college should be established. So that was morning walk from the 12th March. Yeah, that was 2 days earlier, actually. So-called, you hear these recordings, it's the Varnashram walks. Revolutionary. The devotees were astonished. Why was Prabhupada reversing his attitude toward Varnashram? But as they continued to walk with him, they began to understand this new direction as an extension of his compassion. Quote, devotee, personally, he has no problem, but he pushes himself in this degraded society to teach how to live, how to become gentlemen. Otherwise, we have no business. But if we don't give them the opportunity, they'll not be able to come to Krishna consciousness, unquote. And that was from the 14th in Vrindavan. It happened over 3 days, 12, 13, 14 morning walks. Prabhupada kept elaborating because he knew he was introducing something that was new to the devotees. So whenever he did that, he took pains to establish it thoroughly, or to describe it thoroughly. Since devotees are already with Krishna, Prabhupada continued, they don't need Varnashram, but humanity needs Varnashram to learn how to live and come to Krishna. Now, it wasn't long before Prabhupada would further extend his compassion by telling the devotees how much they too needed Varnashram, humanity's, quote, stepping stone for spiritual understanding, Gita 2:31 purport. So 66 to 73, forget it, you don't need it. 74 to 76, we need to establish it to help the world. The world needs Varnashram. Now, by his last year, see phase 3, I titled it, You Need Varnashram. On February 14th, 1977, in his quarters in Mayapur, India, Srila Prabhupada reminded the devotees how important it was for them to inspire and educate people by following Varnashram principles. When a disciple pointed out that Lord Chaitanya dismissed Varnashram as, quote, external, iha baihya, Prabhupada replied, well, our position is different. Our duty is that we shall arrange the external affairs also nicely, that one day they will come to the spiritual platform very easily, paving the way, unquote. When another disciple wondered why devotees who are already on the spiritual platform, beyond the designations of Varna and Ashram, should follow Varnashram principles, Prabhupada challenged his assumption. Quote, Varnashram should be established to become Vaishnava devotee. It is not so easy to become Vaishnava. If Vaishnava, to become easy is so easy, to become Vaishnava is so easy, why so many fall down? It is not easy to become Vaishnava. Unquote. The longer Prabhupada preached in the West, the more he saw how even his own followers would need the Varnashram bridge to come to Krishna. As his life on earth was drawing to a close, Prabhupada knew that building the bridge, a bridge the whole world could cross, would be a great challenge. And now finally, this section is the title of the whole lesson, his Varnashram challenge. In lesson 5, we saw how Srila Prabhupada expanded the Hare Krishna movement in phases. Whereas earlier phases focused on Brahminical concerns and activities, holy names and holy books, temples and deity worship, initiation and congregation, the ultimate Varnashram phase invites everyone to help build a spiritual society. In the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 12, texts 8 through 10, Lord Krishna offers progressively accessible advice. There's a famous, if you can't do this sequence. Because everyone's on a different level. And Prabhupada's going for everybody. Quote, just fix your mind on me. That's a little snippet from text 8. He advises the advanced listener. So that's for pure devotees. Pure devotees can do that. No problem. Fix your mind upon me all the time. For the less advanced, the Lord then recommends the disciplines of Bhakti Yoga. Why? Because, quote, in this way you will develop a desire to attain me. So hopefully we're sadhakas, that's what we're doing. We're practicing devotees. Whereas the devotees assume that that devotee who spoke up, who said, why do we have to follow Varnashram principles? Devotees are beyond that, Prabhupada. Not so fast, buddy. You're assuming you're a devotee? Why are so many people leaving? Why are so many falling down? Why they can't handle it? We need to situate devotees in terms of their varna and ashram. That means people practicing to become devotees, Praya Vaishnavas, aspiring Vaishnavas. Okay, so Krishna says, in this way you will develop a desire to attain me. That's 9. And then 10, Krishna's extending his compassion even further. And for those not ready to follow strict vows, in text 10, Krishna recommends working for him. In his commentary to that text, Prabhupada reaches out to all kinds of readers. Quote, there are many devotees who are engaged in the propagation of Krishna consciousness, and they require help. So even if one cannot directly practice the regulative principles of Bhakti Yoga, he can try to help such work. Every endeavor requires land, capital, organization, and labor, which Prabhupada also got from his study of economics at Scottish Churches College. Land, capital, organization, and labor. This voluntary service to the cause of Krishna consciousness will help one to rise to a higher state of love of God, whereupon one becomes perfect, unquote. So he's encouraging people who aren't Brahminical types. Okay, so Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra types. You can still participate and you can become perfect. Just by this service, you can rise to a higher state by working for me, unquote. Where most people live in or near cities, it is natural to engage them in building temples to attract everyone to Krishna. At the same time, the modern urge to live a simpler, more natural way of life will find fulfillment the more devotees engage people in building spiritual communities that live the way Krishna lives, the rural community. Live the way, I'm going to add rural there. I'm always editing. Rural, and oops, it's right there. All right, anyway, I'll just speak it. Rural spiritual communities that live the way Krishna lives. And here's a quote. And Prabhupada spoke this on his one and only visit to the rural community I lived in for 13 years, Gita Nagari. That's the ISKCON. It's called Gita Nagari Village. It's the rural community in southeast Pennsylvania. And it's a beautiful place. Quote, so this Krishna consciousness movement is trying to revive village organization. When you hear Prabhupada say farms, always think village. Just mean the land. It means all the Varnas who depend on the land for their sustenance, which is everybody. Everything comes from the earth. Sarva kama dugamahi. Everything comes from the earth. And so again, Prabhupada saying, quote, so this Krishna consciousness movement is trying to revive village organization, as you are trying here. This is in mid-July 1976, Prabhupada's one and only visit to Gita Nagari. Krishna in his natural life is a village boy in Vrindavan. Vrindavan is a village. But, then Prabhupada turns, but it does not mean that we shall avoid city life or town life, right? Because Krishna himself, he spent most of his Leela on earth in Dwarka. No, every place is Krishna's place. Everywhere there should be Krishna consciousness. So that was July 19, I wasn't there yet. I didn't start living there till 1980, but Prabhupada didn't come there. And Prabhupada was actually heading there when he tried to make one last tour, but his body didn't let him. He was trying to come to Gita Nagari, and the devotees asked, why? Why do you want to go there, Prabhupada? Because I want to sit down and show you how to live in Varnashram. He really liked that farm. He saw it had all the ingredients of a Krishna conscious village. And then the last slide, I say, Srila Prabhupada's Krishna-centered village contains the spiritual vision to solve the modern eco puzzle. So we can rebrand Varnashram in the modern age as eco this and everybody's eco mad, right? It's like you have Govardhan Eco Village in India, you know. Radhanath Swami has started that. Yeah, because that's just a way of capturing the mind of the modern mind, because everybody's talking eco this and eco that, because they know we're ruining the world. Modern industrial society. To solve the modern eco puzzle, as quoted above, Prabhupada said, quote, if these farms become successful, then the whole world will be enveloped by Krishna consciousness, unquote. And since the Varnashram College would research and manifest the blueprints to that village, it, quote, has to be established immediately, everywhere, wherever we have got our center. But we've been slow to take that up because we're so conditioned by modern society. So then I end with, town or country, reviving the divine Varnashram culture will illumine our natural place in Krishna's world. And by appreciating one another as his eternal servants, we will find the freedom, equality, and happiness we seek in this life and the next. Before I go to the Q&A, the transition to the next lesson is, having seen the scope of Srila Prabhupada's Varnashram vision, in lesson 7, we'll look at how to find our individual mission in his mission. Okay, Prabhus, I'll be happy to receive your questions and comments now. And I'd like to, I'll minimize my script so I can see everybody. There's Giriraj Prabhu, Haribol.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dhanapana. Thank you, Prabhuji, for this quick, lesson and a very interesting division of how Prabhupada saw, Varnashram in 3 different, stages of evolution of ISKCON. So, Hare Krishna, and devotees, please, if you have any questions, you can raise hand or ask on the chat. Prabhuji, one question you received is the Hare Krishna Prabhu. Thank you for a lighting topic. Prabhuji, please inform what is the difference between Varnashram and Devi Varnashram?
Between Varnashram and Daiva Varnashram. Okay, I think we might have talked about this before, but yeah. So the first one I called Vedic Varnashram, right? Okay, so in Vedic times, I mean, there was no need for a Varnashram college because it was just the culture. The samskaras were, everyone knew. For example, I made kind of a humorous reference to the modern attitude towards sex as a contact sport. And, it's no clue. People have no clue that if you come together, just, and very often people do come together intoxicated. That's the modern way. It's no wonder, I mean, just look at the news. That it's being overrun by everybody. There's so much, everyone's so divided in the world, in America and over in Europe and Africa, wherever you go, people are suffering so much because of leaders. There's no training really about what life is for. people don't know the purpose of sexuality is actually to bring the soul into the world, to free the soul from the cycle of birth and death. And you got misleaders who very often they come into power and then the power goes to their heads. And then they, like you got many, like right now, as we speak, there are many countries in the world which are becoming more and more autocratic. And not like in the enlightened Vedic monarchy, where the Vedic monarch is advised by a council of enlightened Brahmins. But you just get people who, the goal of life is not going back to Godhead, it's just amassing power. I can think of countries right now where that's what they're doing. They're just trying to make arrangements so that they can stay in power till death. Even though they might be nominal democracies, they're actually becoming autocracies. Even in America, we survived that challenge. There was no peaceful transmission of power. It was very fraught. And because it was an attempt to, thwart the will of the people in the vote. So Vedic Varnashram is when the culture is naturally spiritually attuned, where people knew from the Vedas. The Vedas were the law books, and people knew that the purpose of life is that the self is not the body, but the soul. The purpose of life is to advance spiritually. And so because that culture is lost, what we have to do is actually revive it in a way that's practical for Kali Yuga. So I call the fourth one Daiva Varnashram for the Kali Yuga. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur talks about this too in his writings. And it's how, even though everything is topsy-turvy and Kaloshudra Sambhava, everybody is lowborn because we're the samskaras, etc., etc. By taking shelter of a pure devotee of the Lord and following his instructions, we can express the whole Varnashram process. Because Vedic Varnashram, it typically took place over many lifetimes. The people would be promoted through the modes of nature, and their Ishtadevas would evolve from, perhaps Lord Shiva, who's giving shelter to people in the mode of ignorance, to Brahma, in the mode of passion, to Vishnu and goodness, and then transcend. It's when we're in goodness, that's the best place to transcend from. But that's a process over many lifetimes. And the culture being supportive of that, there's less of a chance of being degraded into the animal species or lower planets. But it's not, this age is too dangerous, life is too short. The propaganda all around us is to just indulge the senses. So people aren't even karmis in Kali Yuga, they're vikarmis, just creating bad karma and going down. So Vedic Varnashram is a thing of the past, but Daiva Varnashram for the Kali Yuga is what Prabhupada is promoting. Therefore, he was really promoting plain living and high thinking to attract the masses, because he would say that the day will come, and it's already happening, when people are just going to start fleeing their countries. We have so much mass migration all over the planet now because the leaders are so bad, they exploit them. Like in Afghanistan, for example, the Taliban is back in power, and they're just trying to reestablish their authoritarian rule, but people are having none of it, so they're resisting it, but they're in danger, of losing their lives if they speak up. This is becoming like this, even in America. It's so politicized now that people are just like, if you follow the news, what did the FBI do recently? They raided the former president Trump's home in Florida to see what he took with him from the White House that belonged in the National Archives. Sensitive information, top secret information that in the wrong hands could be used to harm America. So, fanatic supporters of Trump were saying, no, these FBI people, they're like the Nazi Gestapo. It's like people are at each other's throats, even in America. So, so people need, they're looking for alternatives. They're looking for a better way to live. They're looking for better leadership. And Prabhupada said this way back in the 70s. We are like 48 years behind the curve. We should be out in front of the eco curve. We have a few, model places, perhaps in Govardhan Eco Village in Maharashtra, or where is that? Maharashtra, yeah. And we have in Hungary, we have Shivaram Swami's Krishna village, and Gita Nagari is there. But we should be, Prabhupada wants us to establish this. He said, wherever we've got our center, there should be a rural community connected with a center. People come into these centers in the cities, and they get a vision of something higher, something better, but then they need a place to practice it outside the city. Prabhupada said we cannot show the full Varnashram village culture in the city, but we can do it at these rural communities. So that's the difference between Vedic Varnashram and Daiva Varnashram for the modern age. In one lifetime, Prabhupada said, don't forget many lifetimes. But everybody can get aboard, depending on your nature, Brahminical types, Kshatriya types, Vaishya types, Shudra types. We need all those types to build a new society. That's Prabhupada's vision. And Prabhupada's vision is so vast and broad and deep, we couldn't even keep up with it. We were just still trying to follow his orders of double book distribution every year. So, yeah. Was that clear? The difference between Vedic and...
Yes, Prabhuji. Yes, Prabhuji. And the devotee is asking, is the Vedic Varnashram and Devic Varnashram? So sometimes we hear Asuric Varnashram. So what is that? Is
Yes,
that what you discussed?
Yes, that's like materialistic Varnashram. That's like the Varnashram that Jarasandha and Ravana, they were all very well schooled in the Vedas. They knew Vedic principles and stuff, but they used it. They misused it. It's, anything powerful is used well for good or misused for evil. So, yeah, they were misusing that. So that's Asura. When the goal is not to develop unalloyed love of God, it's just to enjoy the senses and to try to have the kingdom of God without God on earth. What did Ravana do? Yeah, we don't need to be pious, and we can build a stairway to heaven. So, yeah. So we have to get rid of our inner demon and invoke our inner Prahlad. Yes. Okay.
One question, Prabhuji, I would
Yes.
like to ask is that why a simple living and high thinking concept, which is very much ingrained in our scriptures, that we are finding it so difficult to understand and implement is another thing altogether, where it is like we feel that like the 6 blind men and the elephant, that each one of us understands in a varnashram in a particular manner. And like you mentioned, that barring few, maybe by Bhakti Vikas Maharaj, he has some farms, and in Hungary, like you mentioned, Shivaram Maharaj has, but these are exceptions, very few exceptions. And
Right.
so that why we find it so difficult to even understand what is Varnashram, and is it because we are so conditioned, to the convenience of the city life, that we find it inconvenient to go that path?
Yeah, as I think I've shared before, this is what happened even to us at Gita Nagari in the 70s. I mean, Gita Nagari is doing well now because they have reinvented themselves as an ahimsa dairy and a community-supported agriculture. But in the 70s, even though we were milking a lot of cows, we won an award for having the best herd of brown Swiss cows, and we were canning and drying our food, you know, so we'd have food during the winter. Internally, we weren't really imbibing deeply the culture. We were kind of like refugees from the cities and the suburbs with a very expensive hobby in the country. You know, we were working oxen, protecting cows, but we weren't making it on that. We were to support the community. We actually had another business. We were well, we tried to make something called yogi bars, which didn't quite work. It worked a little bit, but we finally went to selling oil paintings. We would buy these inexpensive paintings, mass-produced in the Far East, which were very well done. And then we'd sell them, you know, high, you know, buy low, sell high. And it brought in a lot of cash. But with that cash, instead of building the infrastructure for a Krishna conscious village, we just sort of maintained our old ways, and we just sort of lived like once a week. Somebody would go into the big city. It's called Harrisburg. It was about 50 miles from Gita Nagari. It's the capital of Pennsylvania. And make a quote run. In other words, buy up all the goodies that we weren't able to produce there, that we were conditioned to, used to, like you say, comfort and convenience. So we wouldn't miss our old creature comforts. Now, having said all that, it's not that everybody will necessarily have to be the pioneers of these communities. And in fact, because many of us are heavily invested with school, family, work in these cities, we can still contribute a lot to Prabhupada's mission. And that's what the next lesson is all about. It's all about finding our mission in the mission. But at the same time, we really do need to build these rural communities to show people a better way to live. You know, there's been many attempts over the years to live peacefully in a rural setting. But even in America, we have this Henry David Thoreau, who was an American transcendentalist who wrote Walden, and he and Emerson, his friend Waldo Emerson, they were reading the Gita. They were the first American transcendentalists. But even Henry David Thoreau, while he was living alone at Walden Pond, you know, and trying to live simply, sometimes he would sneak back to his mother's house to have some cookies, to eat some cookies out of her cookie jar. So that's like a little known fact. But he wrote these books on the virtue of nature and living silently. But you know, Krishna consciousness, when we practice it joyfully perform, Krishna says, it's full of life. Prabhupada says even, you know, 50 years in India, that was from his time. So say around, you know, the early 20th century, people in India, when there were still more people living in the village in India, and it's still majority village, but less, they would, you know, live simply, and they would, you know, work in the fields or whatever. And then they would sit around at night, you know, they would hear from the sadhus of Krishna Lila, or there would be some drama. So they had the high thinking there. So plain living without high thinking is just boring. It's just drudgery. But if you have the high thinking, if you're in the early morning, if you do sadhana, if you do chant the holy names, and you do hear from Shastra, and then in the evening you come together and you have that, well, Prabhupada said they used to do drama, they used to have dramatic recitation of Shastra. I know devotees, God brothers who grew up like that in India. They said, yeah. And my friend Atmatattva Prabhu, he was from Coimbatore, Tamil Nadu. So he said, yeah, I was, raised in a Brahmin family, and we had cooks. We had cooks, and they were Brahmin cooks. And they used to recite Mahabharata and Ramayana all day while they were cooking. They knew these epics. So we as kids, we used to learn, we grew up hearing this stuff. So that's the culture. It's plain living. Yeah, it's living simply. It's not, indulging in the overstimulated modern culture where, Netflix and, all these things that people think they need to be happy and aren't happy. They're empty. It's a deep culture of hearing and chanting about Krishna and being thrilled that we have a life in this life and in the next, where our best friend Krishna is inviting us home back to Godhead. And now in my rambling, I've forgotten your question. Repeat the question. What is the question?
That we find it, Prabhuji, that why we find it so difficult to understand a so-called simple concept of Varnashram. And then, that like the 6 blind men and the elephant, that each one of us have our own understanding.
Yes.
Even of Prabhupada wishing to, because many devotees say, no, he said it in that manner, or Varnashram is not. And, many senior, devotees do say, yes, it was an unfulfilled dream. And some saying, no, it was just casual, they were just comments, like that. So why we find
it's not comments. It's like that subject of Varnashram. There's Prabhupada spoke and wrote volumes about it, but it has to be excavated from his Vani, codified, put in a place, put in a curriculum format to be taught in a Varnashram college. And who were the first customers of the Varnashram college? Us, the devotees. No, it's completely. That's the thing. When people, as you suggest, when people talk about Varnashram, they only have one piece of the puzzle. They only know one thing that maybe Prabhupada said about Varnashram between 66 and 73. Oh, you don't need it, forget it. But his whole presentation evolved as he saw the need for it, and as he saw his own devotees needed it. Because the way he exploded Krishna consciousness, we neglected our nature. But people couldn't handle that over time. They needed ultimately to be situated according to their nature. So we need to do that, and we need to know how to do it in a Krishna conscious way. And luckily, we do have devotees who are still sort of carrying the Varnashram banner, like Shivaram Swami and Bhakti Raghava Maharaj, and in his own way, Bhakti Vikas Maharaj. But the way he's doing it, Bhakti Vikas, only works in that context, South Indian context. The way you apply Varnashram according to time, country, and candidate will really differ according to time, country, and candidate. You can't apply it one way. The principle is there, but the application, the details really varies from climate, time, country, candidate. So it's due to an incomplete vision of the whole thing. And that's why when I present the lesson, I try to give people, there's no time to do it in a detailed way, but at least I give them the whole vision of it. And then what is still missing is the Varnashram College. I mean, we have beginnings of it, and things like the Bhaktivedanta College at Radhadesh, and we have Mayapur Institute and BIHE, but that's just the beginning of it. That's the head part. That's the Brahminical part. But then Prabhupada wanted, because in those morning walks, the devotees like Hridayananda Maharaj and Satsrup Maharaj, they were saying, so what will we teach? What will we learn? What will we teach in this? And Prabhupada said the 4 Varnas and the 4 ashrams. The duties and responsibilities of those Varnas and ashrams, and their interdependence, how they work together. So that's why it's a big puzzle, because we've been slow to even accept the challenge, and what to speak of actually do it by establishing these, first of all, that we have to be educated. So the GBC college is one thing, education and leadership. But that's just one piece too. So it has to be done in a comprehensive way. Maybe we won't see it for a while. And as long as we don't see it, the devotees will have to just do the best they can from studying Prabhupada. It's all in Prabhupada's Vani. What to do, how to do it. But that takes some real will and determination to do that, to excavate it, as I say. So in the meantime, the good news is the next lesson, that we don't have to wait for Varnashram College to manifest, or even for many, rural communities to manifest. We can just, from wherever we're at, Stane Stita Kshutikatam Tanuvan Manovahir, as Mahaprabhu said, we can hear about Krishna and go back to Godhead. But at least it should be said that we have to get it so we can start turning the society around, beginning with ISKCON, to show the world a better way to live. And that's what is required, because unless and until we do that, we can distribute books till we're blue in the face, we can preach till we're blue in the face, but people want to see how we're living better, what kind of a society, what kind of schools do we have that are going to educate our kids better? Well, what kind of lifestyle where it's not so stressful? People are stressed out in these cities. They're becoming more and more stressful. So anyway, next lesson will, this is kind of a cold shower, this lesson. And then in the next lesson, it's kind of picking up the pieces and assuring everyone that we have something to contribute even now. So, okay, looks like we're getting a little late. Are there any more last questions?
No more questions, Prabhuji. And I'm very, very thankful to you for touching this complex topic and presenting us in a simple way so our baby brains can understand and also appreciate how much Prabhupada stressed on these, on Varnashram, and how it is meant for us. Many times we think it is meant for others, but as our movement has shifted from being temple-based to congregation-based, so it is more important that devotees learn it. And like I said, we may not find it in a very near future, but we are hopeful that it will get done. And also we look forward to the next one, like I said, again, from a cold shower back to where we can see ourselves and finding our mission in the mission. So we really look forward to the next session next month.
Okay. And one thing I have to say, the reason the eco door is such a good door, everybody wants to be eco, right? So it's because that with renewable energy and sustainable living, that's the way we can rediscover how to live very nicely in harmony with nature. Prabhupada didn't talk about self-sufficiency. He talked about living in the lap of material nature and depending on Krishna, because Krishna is really the only one who's self-sufficient. So there's technologies out there, even being developed today, which can show people how to live very nicely in nature. We don't have to live like cavemen. We don't have to live like wretches just in the woods or something. We can live very nicely in nature, but not destroy nature. Now, in the name of advancement, people are ruining the world. They're just destroying all of nature's gifts. And nature's pushing back in the shape of war and pandemics and on and on. It's just Mother Nature's had enough. So it's really inspiring people to look. They want alternatives. So we have to be able to provide that. Okay, so yeah, next lesson we'll carry on and we can discuss when exactly that'll happen.
Yes. So thank you so very much. So all of us, we heartily thank His Grace Sureshwar Prabhu for giving us his valuable time every month. And we hear these nectarian classes, which are so educative also and inspiring also. So we heartily thank Prabhuji by loudly chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare. His Grace Sureshwar Prabhu ki jai, Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Hey, Jai. Hare Krishna. Nice to
Hare
see
Krishna.
you.
Thank you.
People.